Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's episode of Couch Trip. That's Eddie Reece. I'm Billy Courtright. We're here to talk about therapy for everyday life. And our last episode ended on Eddie and I waxing poetic and discussing a quote by Shaw, which was awesome. And it was one of the few quotes, or one of the many quotes, however you want to look at it, that Eddie felt was inspirational or informative, or in some way providing some guidance for him and his practice and just the way he looks at the world. So he had said to me after recording that episode, Billy, I've got a list of quotes that I think would make for a pretty good episode. Perhaps we could have this reflections on Shaw or quotes that inspire be part one, and then come up with a subsequent part two, if not part three. And I thought, well, that's just an outstanding idea. And in the meantime, Eddie's done some traveling. He made his way out to, he may tell you about where he went and what he accomplished, but it was an amazing trip with him and his sweetheart. And we're back in the saddle, back in North Fulton County, thinking about our friends in Florida right now, because as we record this episode, Hurricane Milton and his red stapler are bearing down on Florida. If anyone knows the Milton and the red swing line stapler reference, great. You're a fan of Office Space. And if you don't, then I suggest you go out and see Office Space, because Milton.
I love that movie, but I don't remember that.
Oh, yeah. So, Milton was the guy that kept getting paid, but he really wasn't employed anymore, and they fixed the glitch. And he was the guy. He's like, oh, they took my red.
They took my red.
That's Milton. So as we record this episode, Milton is bearing down on Florida, and he is thoroughly, apparently, upset with Florida because he is, as we speak now, a Category 5 hurricane making its way through the Gulf of Mexico. So we're about to talk quotes. Eddie, how are you, my friend?
Yeah, I've been better, been worse.
That's right. It's all about perspective. We're always better than some and not as good as others.
To answer what some people might be wondering, I was in Bandon Dunes, which is a golf resort in Bandon, Oregon, or right at Bandon, Oregon, right on the coast of Oregon. It's my favorite place in the whole world to go.
Yes, I have not been to Bandon. But it is right up there with Pebble Beach and some of the gorgeous courses in Ireland. As far as
it's like a million times better than Pebble. Really, I've been to both a number of times. It's way better. I will argue with golfers that it is the best place in the world to go.
And this week's episode brought to you by the Oregon Convention Visitor and Convention Tourism, whatever they call that, Convention and Visitors Bureau of Bandon, Oregon. So if you ever get a chance to go out west and play a nice course like Bandon, make sure you give Eddie a comment. He'll show you exactly where to go and where to stay. So Eddie, before we get into some of these quotes today, what is it about quotes that people just find so compelling?
There was, when I was looking through the quotes that I picked out for today, there was one about, maybe it was a parable, but it's a short, not a parable, it's something else, but a proverb, maybe. But anyway, it really applies to what a quote is, and why I like them so much, is that it's a short statement based on long wisdom. So it summarizes a lot quickly. So I've always liked them. I started collecting them a while back, and so I've got several pages of them, and then I got a page of my own quotes. Maybe we'll talk about those. I think I made up. Yeah, I think I made up. I can't find them. I've Googled them, can't find anybody else who said it.
No, that's good. That's good. I do think there's something to be said about the when a complicated, complex, or interesting thought, like you said, long thought, can be placed in a succinct or concise statement that's well written and memorable. In some cases poetic, in some cases lyric, but I think that's really what compels me to be drawn to certain quotes. It's an amazing way to articulate a thought, or more importantly, a feeling. And you use the word wisdom. I think that's a really powerful way to look at it. The first quote we're going to talk about is a quote by Carl Jung. Carl Jung is spelled Jung. If you've ever seen his name on a quote, I believe it's pronounced Young. It looks like Jung.
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 Yeah, if you get.
So Carl wrote this quote. We're going to talk about it for a second, but it goes something like this. Seldom, or perhaps never, does a marriage develop into an individual relationship smoothly and without crises. There is no coming to consciousness without pain.
Mm-hmm. And Jung has another quote that I don't know if I've got it exactly right or not, but avoiding pain creates pain. And so that's kind of what I think the theme of our podcast is today. That you've got to face things, as I say it, head on, and to work through them if you want to grow, change, be a better person, develop, however you might want to describe that. It doesn't happen without some pain and heartache along the way. And I often, when I'm talking to clients about this, I'll go back to being a teenager and hitting those growth spurts and lying in bed at night with my knees and legs just killing me, because I was growing, and it hurts. It hurts to grow. So be careful what you ask for.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is Carl Jung or even relevant to the pain reference, but I'm familiar with a statement that what we resist persists.
Mm-hmm.
And
exactly.
It's similar in thinking.
When clients first come to me, they'll say they're sad, unhappy, not happy. They want to be different somehow. And often I'll reframe what they're describing. I go, it sounds like what you are is miserable. And they're like, well, what do you mean by misery? And I say, well, misery is created when you avoid what are often called negative or unwanted emotions, things like sadness or anger or grief, pain. The more you avoid, the more pain, heartache, and misery. It all, to me, equals misery. So you get rid of misery by being sad. If you're sad, if you need to be that, we shut down particular emotions, and then we do things to keep them shut down. And it's the things we do that cause the problems in our life. It's not the emotions we have or the experience we're trying to let go of, which is another sort of thing I always jump on. I tell my clients, you're never going to let go of this. That's not possible. And I think that's actually I turned that into a quote somehow, that you never let go, that you learn to be with differently, because it's always going to be there. You're always going to remember it. How do you be with this in a way that doesn't cause you to run away from it?
Well, that's universally difficult, right? I mean, we'll get into the next quote in a second, but let's tie a bow on that, because, I think all of us face difficulty or challenge or trauma or grief or anger. And I think it's easiest, well, I won't speak for anybody but myself. I think I think me personally get drawn to distraction so as to not deal with that. That distraction could be TV, exercise, shopping, alcohol, whatever. I mean, you ultimately go somewhere to not deal with what you're saying. We need to face it. And I think that's natural, especially today. Am I wrong?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think about it this way, just our survival instincts say avoid pain, don't stick your hand in the fire, avoid unpleasantness, avoid the poisonous berries, So, in a sense, we're wired to avoid pain and pursue pleasure. And that's fine, but you also have to, walk into the pain in order to grow. And it may not always be pain as much as it is something that you believe hurts too much or is too disturbing, something that you think you can put away. I have clients that'll say, I just don't want to deal with that. And I go, that'd be nice if that were a possibility. Yeah. I said, but you have to deal with it. Now you can choose how you deal with it. You can face it head on. And that's what I try to help you do here. Or you can work to avoid it and forget about it, push it away, get over it, be done with that, however you want to frame it. And every attempt you make will make your life worse.
Yeah.
Even if those attempts are things like exercise more, or be more financially successful, or in any of those things you do, there's great payoffs in that. And it may be something that you are very passionate about and want to do. At the same time, it will wind up blowing up in some way, shape, or form. And that's generally labeled as sabotage. I hear this from folks that come in and they go, I just seem to sabotage my life. I get things going and it's good and I like it. And then it just all blows up. And I go, you're not sabotaging it. What it is there's these parts of you that you're avoiding, that you're pretending aren't there, that you've let go of, gotten over. They want to become a part of who you are day-to-day life. And it's vital that they do because they have so many things about them that are really part of your true nature that are really awesome. But you can't find the gifts that are there without inviting the pain and heartache that they bring with it. And so the sabotage is simply, hey, pay attention to us. No, I won't. And so for a while, it seems like you've gotten rid of them. And so they're going to do an end around and they're going to come up and they're going to go, look, if you won't pay attention to us any other way, we're going to blow this up. And then you'll be sad and heartbroken and angry and all these things. So this sabotage is actually a drive to heal and become whole.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's well said. We could go a lot of places with that, but I want to get into I think it's relevant to where we are right now. And it's the next quote by Erica Zhang. And she says that, Erica says, I have lived my life according to this principle. If I'm afraid of it, then I must do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go into those places. Susan Jeffers wrote a book that it really meant a lot to me at the time I read it. Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's courage.
Yeah, and that's what it is. I can't remember maybe if this was in that book or where I came across it, but this idea is like if you decide to skydive and you're in the door of the plane and the jump master is about to tell you to go, and so it's like, okay, go, and you go, well, wait a minute. Let me see if I can calm down first. I don't want to feel afraid. So once I'm not afraid, I'll jump. Okay. Well, the plane's going to run out of fuel. Okay. Because that's not going to happen. And if you could get rid of all of that and jump, when you finish, you go, oh, okay. It wouldn't be the thrill because the level of thrill and excitement is a direct response to the amount of fear you had. The more afraid you are, the bigger that thrill is going to be because that thrill is the relief of your fear not coming true. Okay. So you hit the ground and you're like, and the woohoo is I didn't die.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that was awesome. Now, you go, that was awesome. But when you were first out of that plane, you're like, yeah, no, there's no awesomeness going on. Let me tell you. And I actually talked to one client who finally did skydive, and I said, well, how was it? And everybody I've ever talked to that did it, they're like, oh my God. She goes, I'll never do it again. I didn't enjoy one thing about it.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get rid of your fears, what all this is about. The fears is part of it. And one of the major life lessons is things are scary, things are hard, things are not fun. And you're not going to get to where you're going unless you do those things, unless you go through them, because that's how you learn.
Yeah.
You don't learn the kinds of things you have to learn, especially emotionally, to grow, unless you go through something that feels pretty hard at the time. And clients will tell me, oh, well, that sounds hard. I go, well, I tell you what's harder, and that's staying the way you are and continuing to run away from the fear. That's a lot harder,
Yeah.
and your choice. I don't think we can see it here, but I think I've showed it before in a podcast. My little empty or my little easy answers jar, it shows you that. I got that when I first became a therapist. It's still empty. I'll point to it and I'll go, here's what you're doing. You're looking at this situation and going, that's hard. I want easy. Okay. But you're actually trying to do something impossible, which is to make all this go away. And so you have three choices to, as far as approaches: easy, hard, or impossible. Easy doesn't exist and impossible is never going to work. So really your only choice is hard.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's why the Buddhists start off with everything, and life's difficult. It's hard. But in a sense, it's not nearly as hard as not doing all the things that seem really hard. And then I always get the exact same thing after they kind of go through it. They go, "Oh, that wasn't too bad." And I'm like,
yeah. Well, we make it so much harder in our minds.
We make it hard. Yeah, we turn it into, I'm going to go through this horrible thing. I'll never come out of it if I start crying. I had a client actually say this. If I start crying, I will never stop. He just didn't cry. And I said, well, Loudon Wainwright III wrote a song about that guy, a guy that cried and dehydrated and died and went to heaven. It's a great song. I said, but it's not possible.
Yeah.
It's not possible to cry forever. Right? So I promise you won't. And someone who's very, very guarded, like this guy was, and I told him, I said, and someone like you, if you ever do cry, it won't be for long at all because your entire life is about shutting that down. So if it gets out, you're going to slam it down immediately. So the best you might could do if you said, I'm going to cry, is you might get maybe a tear. But no, you won't really even cry.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a couple different quotes about similar to that, like everything worthwhile is on the other side of fear and all that. But essentially, we've talked about pain, we've talked about fear, and there's a common thread, and that is there's always something worthwhile. Hopefully, having endured.
Oh
that.
yeah, always.
Yeah,
and it's always something that is surprising. And it's surprising in a way that you thought that was possible, but you never thought you could have it. And then you experience it, or it's something that you didn't even really know that any of this was about.
right.
It's a whole new place for you. And so it will always work out for the best, but you're going to have someone guide you through it who has been through it. And that's what therapy is. One of the sort of disappointing kinds of things is that you can't do this kind of stuff on your own. Because no one showed you, and not only has no one shown you, the entire world does all it can to keep you from doing it. One of my favorite quotes is E. Cumming. It says, to be yourself in a world that works night and day to turn you into somebody else is the hardest fight you'll ever have, and keep fighting.
Yeah. Wow. Message.
And yeah, so you have to quote Jimmy Buffett's song. You have to be a cultural infidel. You have to swim upstream about this kind of stuff. You have to say, I'm not gonna just turn my life over into becoming this thing that's not me, that will be loved and accepted and revered and okay and have no problems, because that's the impossible. Okay. You can only be who you are. And if you are sad, hurt, traumatized, don't know how to cry, don't know how to be happy, then that's who you are, and you've made yourself that by trying not to be who you are. So find the parts of you that you have turned into monsters, and when you meet them, they're not monsters. And, I've always wanted to make a short film that's a play on horror movies, and so you think about a movie like Halloween, they try to kill Jason off, and they kill him off, and he comes back, and they kill him off, and he comes back. My thought about those kinds of movies are that the monster in those movies represent the parts of ourselves that we have done our best to shut down. You can't kill them all because it's you. And they're going to keep coming back, and you've turned them into a monster so that you'll get rid of them and get rid of them and get rid of them and get rid of them. And so in my little short film, that would be going on. And then, the monster pops up again, and the protagonist just turns exasperated and goes, "All right, what do you want?" And the monster says, "I just want you to listen to me. I just want you to care about me. I want to show you who you are." That's what they all say. That's what they're all after. And so if we can live our lives that way of constant exploration, the quote of the thing I'm afraid of, that's where I go, we see something, we think, go look at it. It's not going to be what you think it is.
Yeah. And that brings us back to the curiosity that you love to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Robert Bly says, from our deepest wounds come our greatest gifts. And it's true. It's really true. I mean, the 30 some odd years of therapy I've had and the clients that I've had, it's always true. It's always true. I've never gone through any of my own healing. I've never walked somebody through their healing and had it turn out bad. It always turns out really well.
Well, even the term healing. I mean, gosh, the fact that you could be wounded, and we all are, and that's not a death sentence. It can heal. There's life after that. Yes, it's hard. It's painful. Probably exhilarating to some degree. To experience the healing, I would imagine.
No, not really.
Okay.
It's not fun. Back to Jimmy Buffett, he's got a song. It's called "The Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost." The opening line is, "Looked at my laptop. What did I see today is therapy." And he says, and there's like something in there I can't remember yet. But it's like, I just don't want to go, and I don't want to face it. And it's like the three things I'm afraid of the most: the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. It's tricky. It's, and I use that word because I turned hard into tricky. It's not hard, it's tricky. And there's tricks to it. So, and once you know the tricks, it's not that hard.
Well, it's fitting we jump into a William Halsey quote, which you had highlighted for this episode, and you touched on it just a moment ago. And so, just to be able to continue on the exact thought pattern you're on, but let me throw this in there before you continue. All problems become smaller if you don't dodge them, but confront them.
Mm-hmm. Right. They become smaller, and they pretty much, for the most part, aren't even problems anymore.
Well, so much of the anxiety is what might happen if I address this, face this,
right,
deal with this, and then all of a sudden you deal with it in a therapy session. You're dealing with it in cooperation and collaboration with a good therapist, and so I think there's probably some comfort there. But the reality is it's a lot more taxing on our spirit and psyche of what could go wrong than actually what happens.
Yeah, and the difference between what you imagined and what really happened, and that was, I saw a very dramatic example of that. On my trip out to Bandon, there's a documentary I watched called "The Girl Who Wore Freedom," and I enjoy World War II history, and so that's what caught my eye about this. And it was about the D-Day celebrations that go on every year in France, and I've been to Normandy and stood on Omaha Beach. I saw that stuff, and so I really love that part of the history of the war. And so these guys, they're talking to these guys that were coming back. And they also spent a lot of time talking to the people who actually lived through it, the people who lived there in Normandy, which I'd never seen a documentary that did that, which I thought, I'm like, this is a brilliant idea. So it got to this scene that is this example of it's just not like you think it is. This lady who sort of was involved in setting up these visits for the veterans, and she would get the veterans together. She knew the townspeople and knew the ones that had survived the war, and would talk to them, and they get all these people together to spend a few days together and share their experiences. And there was this one guy who would never take that trip. He said, listen, I was involved in this battle, and we slaughtered civilians, just slaughtered them. And he said, I have no reason to believe they would want anything to do with me. And he said, I know if I went there, I would just get all this awfulness from them, that you came here and you did this, And so anyway, somehow they got him to go. And the scene in the documentary is the lady's telling his story, and you're hearing him talk about that and say that stuff. And then there's this lady who had been in pieces of the documentary, who had been a young girl there. And her experience was that exact battle that he was in and was talking about. And sure enough, her family was killed. And so she got the two of them together. Right? And this woman told him, and you can imagine how terrified the veteran was in meeting her, because all of the nightmares that he was sure would happen, that she would just let him have it. And she said, my family was killed in that battle. My mother, my father, my brother, my sister. And of course, at that moment, I mean, I'm sure this guy was like ready to just get slapped or something, And then she says, and I want to thank you for what you did. You liberated us. You freed us. Yeah, it cost the lives of my family, but I can't thank you enough. And she said, and I'm so glad to meet you. And it's just such a powerful example of what we're talking about, at least for me, of this thing you're so sure would happen if you faced the thing you don't want to face. And it very much happens this way, that something you would never believe would happen, couldn't make up, actually happens. And then the woman who coordinates all this, she said, and after that meeting, and they spent some time together talking about their experiences, that this guy, I forget his name, was a totally different man.
I imagine, yeah.
He had lived his life kind of closed off. He never really talked about the war. The way she painted the picture, he seemed to be kind of maybe introverted, but almost scared. And she said he danced that night. He was all over the room. They have this big gathering, big meal and music and everything. He was so happy because it frees you. And that's another quote. I think Dr. King might have said it. The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. and the truth set him free.
Yeah.
But first it scares you, which is another way to make that quote. First it's going to scare you. Chasing's going to scare you. But it will set you free because you find this part. He found this part of him that was happy and free. To really be himself, and that happens 100% of the time. It absolutely does, which is why I'm such a zealot, a preacher about self-exploration, healing, therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy. Because of my experience on it.
Well, it's such a beautiful way to phrase it. And, I have no reason to presuppose I know what people are going through who are contemplating therapy. But in the context of healing, there's no other part in our life we would let something fester. We would never let a wound go unaddressed.
No, there's plenty of people that won't go to a doctor.
Okay, well, perhaps not,
yeah,
but you're not going to bleed out and wonder what you could have done about it.
I mean, something like that. But I mean, there's people that.
Well, this guy right here, I hear the word healing and I feel hopeful.
Oh yeah, I mean, hopeful. I mean, it does. It gives you hope. I can't imagine the kind of pain. I can imagine it. I've worked with veterans that have been through the war. I've heard stories that I won't tell anybody. I do not want those images in anybody else's psyche. So I can't imagine it, but I can't relate to what he lived through all those years. He had to be in his 80s.
And he had to be a teenager when it happened.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the amazing things about World War II. I flew in a B-52 bomber, and the guys that were doing it, of course, they're all into what they do. They're about, these planes were captained by 19-year-olds, and a bunch of 19, 20-year-old guys in here, and I'm just like, Lord mercy.
Yeah.
What that must have been like. These kids, being an old guy, somebody 19, somebody's 30's a kid. But
I still refer to myself a kid. I'll be 50. Well,
I'm long past being.
No, you're still a kid at heart, Eddie. So I'm reminded of another quote that you threw in here, which I'll read. There are many paths to wisdom, but they all begin with a broken heart.
Broken heart.
That's Cohen.
Yeah, Leonard Cohen. Yeah.
There are many paths to wisdom, but each begins with a broken heart. And alongside that would be the Simone Weil quote of "Pain is the root of all knowledge." So what is it about this endurance? This it's just like I know to make an omelet, some eggs got to be broken, but there's something to be said about something positive, wisdom, knowledge, growth. You talked about it with your growing pains as a young boy.
Oh yeah, I mean, what is it? Wisdom comes from experience, and experience comes from mistakes.
Yeah.
You don't learn a lot when you do it right. You learn a lot when you do it wrong.
Yeah.
And so you have to do a lot of things wrong in order to learn. And this one thing that we coming back to, trying to make things go away, that's doing it wrong. And eventually you're going to learn from that. Eventually it's going to come back and get you in a way that you won't be able to ignore. And so go ahead and ask the monster what it wants. Who are you? What do you want? What do you want me to know? That's always my question. What do you want me to know that I'm not getting? Tell me, tell me. And to befriend these parts of yourself that you think are ugly, unlovable, disgusting, whatever it is. You have to go in there and embrace them rather than fight them away. And they will teach you all the things that you really want to know, but you think you either already know or you're going to get by, marrying this person, having this job, living in this house, having this much money, driving that car, using this toothpaste, drinking that beer, whatever the culture tries to sell you, that never works. If it, it's like skincare products. I see a new skincare product. I'm like, if any of this crap really worked, they wouldn't need to make anymore. I mean, but that's our culture. Is you here's a new one, get this one, get this one, get this one. Then you'll be okay. Which is I call it when then thinking when I'm talking to people about it. I say you're when thenning. Well, when this happens, when I get here, then I will be okay. And I'm like, you're not going to be okay until you can be okay right now.
Yeah.
No matter what's going on. And then you really won't be okay until you quit playing that game altogether and there is no okay to be. That's the whole problem, because you'll never be okay. You're only going to be who you are. And to have a judgment about that in a way that hurts you, squashes something down, it's not going to work.
Eddie, I've got a quote for you. This one you may have never heard. I had actually heard it a couple weeks ago, and I wrote it down in my notes. And I thought, if we ever talk about quotes again, I want to bring it up to Eddie. So this is a quote that it was part of a book that I was listening to by Dr. Benjamin Hardy called Your Future Self Now. And he quotes a doctor, Dr. Peter Levine, who I had never heard of.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the fact that you're nodding, you've heard of Dr. Levine. And this quote is about trauma. And when I heard it, it kind of stopped me in my tracks a little bit. I was at the gym when I listened to audiobooks at the gym, and I stopped and I wrote this down, and I'm like, I got to get this to Eddie. So we're talking about quotes today, and I threw it at the end of your list. And here it is. Trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness.
Read it again to me.
Trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness.
Right. And boy, I mean, that he nails it in that trauma, which is probably misused 98% of the time when people say it. It's not about the event. It's about your response to it. And that's true about everything. I remember after Phil Niekro, Atlanta Braves pitcher, gave up the game-winning home run. I said, Phil, how did it feel to give up the game-winning home run? One of the stupid questions that sportscasters have. And I remember Phil saying, I can't control what happens. He said, I can only control my reactions to it. And so, yeah, what Levine's talking about is what's your response to the trauma? And we're not taught how to respond to not only trauma, but even things that are uncomfortable. Okay. I had an experience, I won't mention exactly what it was, but I got some feedback later that some of the things I had said were offensive. And I'm like, and then like within a day or two, there was some quote I saved in my phone um, about it was explaining that basically what I got from it is people take something that they disagree with when somebody says something that they disagree with, and now they call it offensive.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh man, that's exactly what goes on. And so I'm sure I was saying things that they disagreed with. I always do when I give a talk. I mean, that's part of fun for me. I want them to challenge me, and so I can help them see what I see, which will be different than what they see. But yeah, it's not. It's not. It's just different.
Yeah,
it's just different. And I always think of my late adolescent heroes, Monty Python, that there's just some people who need to be offended.
right.
Yeah.
What struck me the most, Eddie, about this specific quote, and the reason it just hit home for me personally, is the fact that it references the empathetic witness, which is to say, in my opinion, that when someone is there acknowledging what you're going through,
right,
it's freeing. It's, to your point, it's therapeutic, it's healing. But without that empathetic witness, we hold it inside and we don't know what to do. My question directly to you, sir, is the therapist in that scenario the empathetic witness?
Oh, absolutely. And at the same time, showing the client how to be their own empathetic witness. Okay. And I go back to the story of when my dog was killed. And my memory of that is sitting on the front porch of my house and just wailing. And I'm all by myself, and I don't know, it might have been like 30 years later, I turned on the TV and to watch something, and there was something, I still don't even remember what it was. It was just a flash that had dogs or something. And I started wailing again. And so it was a horrible experience for me just on the surface. I found my dog ripped to pieces, and carried the pieces home. So, I mean, horrible. But if somebody had been there on that porch with me, who was an empathetic ear, and this, and again, this is something we have to be taught. I think maybe we're born sort of like that. Small children just seem to, if you're in pain or something, they go over and want to comfort you in some way, but that's all knocked out of us. If somebody were there with me at the porch going, oh my God, how horrible, what a horrible experience. No wonder you're wailing. Oh my God. Cry as hard as you want, cry as loud as you want. I'm going to sit right here with you, you know? And just what you're doing and what the empathy does, it assures you that the you are right now, this wailing human being full of intense, unimaginable, and seemingly unfathomable pain that you cannot endure. You will endure it. And you are lovable. You are not crazy. Of course, you feel this way. How could you not? Um, and I'm right here. I'm right here. That's when the healing happens. Um, because crying alone like that, I go, nobody cares.
Yeah. Right.
Nobody cares. Um, and if somebody had walked out of the house, I know I would have shut it down because I'd already learned by that time in my life, you don't show strong emotion in this feeling or in this family, other than, being outraged or shaming in some way. So I would have shut it down anyway. But if they, somehow they could have, they couldn't have, they don't know how to do this. Nobody did it for them. If one of my parents or even my brother sat down, I said, I heard you crying. My dog, and they, oh my God, and sat through it. That's what we're all looking for. I, I know this. I don't believe this. I know this to be true. That take any one of us and what any one of us really wants more than anything else in the world, and we don't even know we want it, okay, is for somebody to do that, for that empathetic ear, and to do that with the parts of us that we are so sure nobody wants anything to do with. So this war veteran, he knew for a fact that nobody in that town he was in would want anything to do with it. And when this woman welcomed him and embraced him and said, thank you, that's what it took. And then to listen to his stories and for her to listen to his stories, her stories, and because you're saying you are who you are. Yes, you did this. Yes, you went through this. Yes, your dog died. Yes, it was a horrible experience finding your dog. Of course you hurt. Of course you're terrified. Of course, you would think none of us would want anything to do with you in the case of the veteran. But we are grateful to you, to validate who you are, and who you are is okay. That's the thing that all of us want. And I think in those of us that don't know that, which is most of us, and those of us who may even sort of know it, but don't know how to get it, when we put all these other things out there to make up for that, which is impossible, you can't make up for anything. We separate ourselves from ourselves, and no matter what we're after, I want to be happy, I want to be successful, I want to be this, I want to be that, whatever we're shooting for, it may come from a deep passion, but is also being used to make up for that lack of an empathetic ear. as Levine says. We're all looking for that. We're all looking for somebody to go, oh my God, that sounds horrible, and not try to change it. But what most of us are trying to do is go, oh no, that sounds awful. You'll get through this. It'll be okay eventually. They always give us this wonderful outcome. And even if it's true, you'll be okay. Even if it's true, I mean, I'm okay. I didn't die from seeing my dog. You can't do that without hearing the pain. You can't do that until you've heard their story.
Well, this has been interesting. We examined a few quotes today. We talked about a common thread. I think it's pretty clear. We talked about pain. We talked about growth. We talked about fear. We talked about wisdom. We talked about knowledge. We talked about empathy. We talked about therapy in the context of each and every one of these quotes. And hopefully you were enlightened, perhaps even inspired. And as Eddie has said many a times, we've reminded you over and over again, if anybody listening or viewing felt compelled to do a Google search or ask for a referral or reach out to a therapist, the idea that you could be struggling, that you could be suffering, that you could be miserable and think there's absolutely no way forward is really why we're doing what we're doing. Because I know Eddie believes, and I'm a believer as well, there is a way forward and healing can happen. And whether you're dealing with trauma or pain or fear or shame or whatever the case might be, there's likely an empathetic witness in your future. And if you need help finding one, you can reach out to us privately. You can always reach out in the comments, or you can do a simple Google search and ask a family or friend, if they know a good therapist in the area, because therapy for everyday life is not affecting every one of us. But if it was up to Eddie and I, it would. So this has been another episode of Couch Trip Therapy for Everyday Life. Eddie, any final words for the audience?
I don't know. I got better pictures than words sometimes. I'm so grateful to you, Billy, and the opportunity that this podcast gives me to share these things. I'm an old guy running out of runway. This is one of my clients said one day. And it is such a wonderful feeling, kind of a joy to put these podcasts out there, and hope that somehow, some way, it touches somebody and helps somebody, and will live on long after I'm gone, and hopefully do that for as many people as possible, because it sure, that empathetic ear sure changed my life, and I want everybody to experience that. I really do.
Well, I don't have a doubt in my mind that you've changed quite many lives with that empathetic ear. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be happy to come back to you next week with another episode of Couch Trip. We'll talk to you soon.